We all rely on farmers and ranchers, but farming is riskier than other businesses out there. Crop insurance helps farmers manage their risk. With crop insurance, farmers put skin in the game by paying premiums and shouldering deductibles. That keeps taxpayers from having to pick up the whole bill every time disaster strikes. Today, about 90% of U.S. farmland is insured, providing $100 billion in protection to more than 130 different kinds of crops. It's a testament to the program's success.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse Senior Editor Phil Brasher, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C. this week, the ball keeps rolling towards things that we've been looking for quite a while. And we inched ever closer this week to a long-held goal for the Republican Party, that, of course, being tax reform, and something that happened before a tax reform bill could possibly be introduced or released or anything of that measure. The House and Senate had to agree on some kind of a budget proposal, and Phil, they did that today, this week. We're recording on a Thursday. The House agreed on the Senate proposal that the budget proposal that was passed through the Senate.
Yeah, and why this is important, as we've talked about it before, is this sets up the method for big tax bill to pass the Senate without potentially any Democratic support. It's called the budget reconciliation process, and it sidesteps the normal 60 votes that you need to move almost any other kind of legislation through the Senate. So they take care of this step. Now they just have to have a bill with a very complex tax bill, to put on it and move in the weeks and months ahead.
And of course, the Senate version of the bill that was ultimately passed by both chambers includes no reconciliation instruction for agriculture. Very key for folks that are going to be writing the farm bill to not have to find that extra money that they were going to have to make up for.
Very good point. The House version of this budget actually would have required the Ag Committee to make a $10 billion cut, presumably in food stamps. And presumably as part of the Farm Bill. That is gone. There's no instruction for any kind of cut, so now the Ag Committees can move forward with the money that they have. They've still got a lot of demands on that, so it's still not going to be easy, but they won't have to cut.
And now we're going to move forward to something that's been on the agenda for Republicans really since the election of Donald Trump. Something that they knew they could accomplish once they had a Republican president, being comprehensive tax reform. That's something that a lot of folks have been wanting to do for quite a while. And Phil, we're getting ever closer to the potential to actually seeing some legislation as to what that might look like.
Right, and starting next week, the House Ways and Means Committee is going to release its proposal. The week after that, we expect the Senate Finance Committee to release its proposal, and then both committees will be acting over the next really 3 weeks, and then with the intention of moving those bills to the floor. Now, probably the number one goal for the Republicans is to lower the corporate tax rate, talking about 20-25%, in that range. With the intention of bringing money back also that's overseas. And another important element would be to reduce the tax on pass-through businesses. That's partnerships, S-corps, and sole proprietorships and the like, talking about a cap of 25%. What's really going to be important for agriculture is the rules that they write on pass-throughs. There's a big concern is if they really lower that rate, that a lot of wealthy individuals will route what is personal income, try to route it through essentially a business form through a pass-through in order to get that lower tax rate. So we'll be watching to see what those rules actually turn out to be. That's potentially a very tricky situation. Also, another issue is the estate tax. Republicans want to repeal it, but we could see something, maybe a higher exemption or something like that. They've been keeping their reps very closely, a lot of negotiations going on behind the scenes on that issue as well as pass-through and other issues.
So no legislation is public in terms of what Republicans are actually going to try to do on tax reform, that being that as soon as it's public, it's there for public consumption and public attack. And so as soon as that bill is introduced and announced for public viewing, likely next week, we will be sure to have a breakdown of what that means for you, for your business, for your operation on Agri-Pulse.com. We do want to close this week with some news that we've been following for quite a while regarding some developments on the renewable fuel standard. And last week there was a big success for supporters of the program when EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt sent a letter to a number of Republican senators, specifically from Corn Belt or Western Corn Belt states, saying that basically offering a number of assurances that allowed for some EPA nominees to move forward through the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. Mainly, they were very happy to see in that letter that there were assurances that he would not reduce the renewable volume obligations in the upcoming release for those at the end of November. But the assurances that he offered are starting to rear their head to some extent. Today, or earlier this week, there were a number of senators that sent a letter directly to President Trump expressing concern about the RFS and some of the ramifications that they feel it might lie. Those states, mostly oil-producing states, in play there. And Phil, we're also seeing Senator Ted Cruz put a hold on a very popular USDA nominee that was expected to get easy Senate approval.
The lead writer of that letter, yeah, he has put a hold on Bill Northey's nomination to be the Undersecretary for. Well, this is another issue that we won't get into, but in terms of his title,
a Undersecretary
at USDA, basically for farm programs and eventually conservation programs. But as I said, that's another issue. But Senator Cruz has put a hold on floor action on Bill Northey's nomination as pushback against the Iowa and the Midwest senators getting these commitments from EPA on the RFS. Pat Roberts, the chairman of Senate Agriculture Committee, said he's had a couple of conversations with Senator Cruz, hasn't gotten anywhere at this point, but hopes to next week get some kind of an agreement, get Senator Cruz to lift his hold, and then move forward on get the Northey nomination and get Northey installed at USDA. There's no controversy, no opposition to Bill Northey at all. It's simply that he's gotten caught up in this crossfire between basically the oil industry and the ethanol and biodiesel sectors.
And what a new, exciting, and fresh debate that is. Certainly one that we've never seen before in these parts. But just a simple case of a nomination getting caught up in the political process. And it seems like for weeks now we've been talking about the nominations of Bill Northey and Greg Iba getting ever closer and closer to actually being full-time USDA employees. Not quite there yet. We'll be sure to keep you up to date. Keep you up to date as to when that happens. But still working to keep staffing up the Department of Agriculture and through the Senate confirmation process. But I think that's going to do it for this week. So for Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.